Take more pictures.
Going on?
Fun. No, I'm supposed to say I turned the jacuzzi on.
I already turned it on.
What?
It's been on for a couple hours.
Oh, it's been on?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Hello.
Howdy.
Hello. Welcome. Hey there.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
You see this? I'm wearing my new hat. My Los Angeles.
Mine hasn't
Oh
come
my
yet.
God.
Pants. I got it last week. I'm very excited about it.
You got it last week?
Yeah.
I'm still waiting.
Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going out anywhere. So
Hey, I am tomorrow.
Nobody is.
no one gets to see my hat. No, I my daughter's in town. Rachel's in town, so that was nice. We got to it's Cher's birthday tomorrow, and she came in for Thanksgiving and came in a little early to visit. So that was nice. But I just found out tonight, one of my good friends, well, somebody who I don't get to see very much for the last few years, we're always on opposite ends of the country. I just found out he has pancreatic cancer and is at the end of his life. And I just feel like I literally found out 15 minutes ago, like 6:45. It's like a kick in the gut. Really wonderful guy. And yeah, just one of those.
So many losses.
Yeah, well, he hasn't, but he's doing a talk about his end stage, and if it's Monday night, he's doing a Zoom thing. We went to the same rabbinical school. He was older than me. We only overlapped by 1 year. He graduated as I came in. Harvey actually might have met him before.
Who is it?
Harvey, were you a member of Beth Shalom about 20 years ago?
Probably about that. Yeah, 2025.
So there was a rabbi there for a couple of years. I think he was there for 2 years, 3 years. His name was Raphael Goldstein.
No. We were there with Rabbi House.
Yeah. So it was right after House got let go in 96.
Okay, we were there before then.
And so he was the rabbi there for a couple of years. And he moved around a lot, but he was a really, really sweet guy. And he actually got me the job that I had. My student pulpit was where his pulpit was, when student pulpit in Greenwood Lake, New York. He recommended me for that job. I mean, he didn't get me the job, but he recommended me his pulpit. And I ended up serving there for 4 years. And so he was an instrumental person in my life. But yeah, and he's maybe mid 60s. So he's gonna, if the lecture is something of value and it's taped, I'll definitely share it with people. I hope it's not too depressing and sad, but he's talking about what he's learned and he's trying to share some of his wisdom from this experience of transitioning, if you will. Speaking of transitioning and tough responses, but beautiful responses. I don't know. So a couple of people posted about it. Nobody here, but yesterday or 2 days ago, I heard Eddie Van Halen's son Wolfgang wrote a really powerful song about losing his father. Eddie Van Halen. He wrote a rock song about losing his dad, and very raw. I mean, it's a beautiful song. It's called Distance. And it's about losing someone close to you, but really like a father or a parent. And it's a very powerful song. So it just debuted 2 days ago. I mean, he wrote it before he died. He shared it with his dad before he passed, and then finished it in the last couple of weeks. But anyways, it's tough. It's tough times. What can we say?
It really is. You probably heard Sherry Fleming die.
I did. Sherry Fleming passed away a couple of days ago. She wasn't sick, or at least they hadn't announced her illness for.
She wasn't sick. A sudden brain aneurysm, and it was impossible to save her. It was shocking.
Did you know her pretty well, Joyce?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yes.
They were very. I know they were very involved with a lot of the Fleming.
A lot of the charities that I was involved with.
Yeah, children, family and children's center, and
Yeah.
a lot of,
And Henry May and
yeah.
College of the Canyons, and she was involved with all of those groups. And it was very sudden, and
also pretty young,
immediate.
and also pretty young too.
yes, immediately went to the hospital. They did brain surgery twice, and they couldn't save her. It was tragic.
Sorry.
Fast.
Anyways,
Oh, these are hard times.
yeah, and like you said, some of them are surprises.
Yes.
Anyways, well, everybody stay healthy, please.
Please.
Let's
And,
not make,
you
let's
know,
not make any more problems and losses, and add to our losses at this time. You know.
we don't want to do that.
No. So, on a happier note, well, last week we actually talked about a little bit about death. You can see I'm wearing a sweater today. I was outside. I don't really need it inside, but I was.
You're never
outside.
cold,
I
Rabbi.
know. I was outside with my daughter, and then we just came in just now.
Walk the dog.
You were correct, sir. Yeah. You actually, Harvey, are correct. The funny thing about Rachel, by the way, I'll say before we start, she is not a dog person, and she hasn't quite warmed up to the dog, but she's not as bad as it could have been. She is not. This was not something that. She's like, how did you give in?
We witnessed that firsthand, Rabbi.
Yeah,
You got to bring her over to the house, Mark.
What? To
You
your
got
house?
to bring her to the
You-
house.
You want to see the dog?
I want to see Rachel.
Oh, I thought you meant the dog.
No,
no,
no. The dog is wonderful, but
listen,
Rachel is the
Rachel,
one that needs help.
okay, well, she just got tested. You're right. She's doing better though. I have to say. I was going to say she's doing much better with this dog than we thought. You can't be scared of this dog. This dog is so gentle. And you know what? It was nice is she said, Rachel had said that this is actually helping Tracy too. And Tracy really is calmed by the dog. So she noticed it. It's good for her mom. But yeah, I mean, it's pets do that. They do that for us. Not for me, but for other people who want to have pets. They definitely do calm people down. So but Rachel's okay with it. It's better than we thought. So we went out tonight and walked the dog a couple times, and Tracy and Shira are out. Shira's celebrating her birthday tonight a little bit with. She went to lacrosse tonight, so Shira goes about once every other week to play lacrosse, which is kind of weird because there's not a lot of sports going on right now, but they're letting them play lacrosse. I don't know. What are you going to do? It's good for her, and she's getting a little bit of activity. But yeah, Rachel just got tested today. That's now part of our lives too. We got to get corona. We got to get corona tests whenever somebody comes into our lives. It's kind of weird. How did we get here? But yeah, she got tested today. So I would definitely not bring her over, Joyce, until we got a report on her health. And
Okay.
let's hope that she's good. Let's hope. Well, listen, folks, we're gonna get into the Torah right now. And last week we had two life cycle events. We had Sarah's death and we had Isaac's marriage. We learned a little bit more about the death than we do about the marriage, or at least the ritual of the marriage. We read the negotiations for both. Not a lot about what happens during the ceremonies, but we do read about the negotiations for the purchase of the plot, burial plot, and we read about the purchase prices or negotiations, if you will, for the purchase of a bride, the business end of these rituals, of these life cycle events. Not so much about what happens during the ritual itself. What happens to the bride and groom? We really don't get that kind of picture, if you will, of what these things look like, which would be nice. Even a detail here or there could really help us understand what marriage rituals look like for our ancestors. Today, we hit the other of the big three rituals. Obviously, we have coming of age rituals in Judaism too, but rituals for birth, marriage, and death are kind of the unifying rituals of most cultures have. Most cultures also have coming of age rituals. Judaism definitely does. Other faiths, by the way, are sometimes not as on the ball when it comes to coming of age rituals, and are missing those things. I mean, I've had ministers tell me several times in different different people that they wish that they had something like a bar or bat mitzvah. Now, we don't hear about bar and bat mitzvahs in the Torah. We read about them. We read about the recognition of that transition in the Talmud, and the Christian Bible talks about Jesus at 12 that he's teaching in the temple. Seems to be like he has like a bar mitzvah kind of thing, but we don't hear about it in the Torah. We don't hear about the coming of age rituals. We do have a wedding, and we read about last week. We finished with. Now we have birth, and we've read about other births before. We read about the birth of Isaac. We read about the birth of Ishmael, but now we read about Isaac having a baby. So the last thing we read is that last thing we read is about Ishmael. Actually, we have this interesting half chapter about Isaac, about Isaac's half brother. But the last thing we read about Isaac is that he brought Rebekah into the tent of his mother Sarah and took Rebekah as his wife. It's a beautiful chapter, as we said. It's a beautiful end to that chapter. Beautiful conclusion to the Isaac story of, again, finding comfort after his mother passed. So then we go through chapter 25, and then it's not halfway through chapter 25, but in verse 19, we pick up Toldot. And it begins, this is the story of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Now, I will just pause right there and say that seems to be somewhat of a redundant sentence, right? The rabbis point out, why does it say Isaac was the son of Abraham, Abraham begot Isaac? It just says Ben Abraham, this is Abraham's son Isaac. This is his story. These are his generations. And that's what the word Toldot means. The name of the portion, Eled Toldot, the second word, these are the generations, or this is the story. I like generations better, but the point is that because the word Toldot comes from the same root as this word holid, which means beget, or yeled, or yoled, which is to give birth to, or to be a child. So it's not just the story. It's not like a narrative. It's about their line. That's also the way sometimes it's translated. These are the descendants of Isaac, or these are the generations, or this is the line of Isaac. But the redundancy of this, Abraham begot Isaac. Now, obviously, Sarah begot Isaac, but we use the word, begot for a father, that this is his son. But why does it say it twice? It says, son of Abraham, Abraham begot Isaac. So the rabbis point out, this is to give you very clear, emphatic statement that Abraham is indeed Isaac's father. Now, why is this important? Well, we read in the last couple of portions that Abraham had a situation where his wife, Sarah, is with two other men. Now, it doesn't say that, it actually specifically says kind of that they didn't lay a hand on her, but she was in the bedroom of Pharaoh and in the bedroom of Avimelech. And so when the Torah hits us with, oh, Abraham was definitely Isaac's father, it's telling us this because Don't let anybody say that there was any other father for Isaac besides Abraham. And there's an interesting midrash on this, which is that Isaac was almost a near replicant of Abraham, that Isaac was like a copy of his father, so that nobody would ever question the paternity. So this is an interesting, again, no, the rabbi said this is not here accidentally. There must be a reason. So that's why we have it. And here's what it says, that Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean. And here again, it tells us who Rebekah is, who her father was, and who her brother was. And again, that these are relatives of Abraham. But he's 40 years old. And so that means that he marries her 3 years after his mother, Sarah, died. Sarah dies at 37, and then by 40, he's married. This is all critical because, number one, it shows us that he's pretty old by the time he gets married, by the time he's ready to start a family. And it's not easy for him to start a family. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, just like his mother, just like Sarah. And remember, Sarah is also related to Rebekah. They're all from the same family. So if there's a genetic predisposition where it's tough to have children, and remember, Jacob's wife, Rachel, was barren, couldn't have children. Also, remember, Rachel is Laban's daughter, which means that she's Rebekah's niece. Rachel is. So there seems to be a genetic issue, or at least a very common situation for these matriarchs. Leah is the only one who does not have a hard time getting pregnant. And so she can't have kids. And it says, the Lord, Isaac pleaded on me. So he prays for her. And that's what the word says. He pleaded with her. And the Lord responded to his plea, and his wife Rebekah conceived. But be careful what you pray for, right? The children struggled in her womb, and she said, if so, why do I exist? Imken lama zeh. Why do I exist? Lama zeh, why am I here? So painful. She went to inquire of the Lord. So she goes to inquire of the Lord. So it seems at first that Isaac prays for her. Now she goes to God. And the Lord answered her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 separate peoples shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So Rebekah knows, even before she has children, that she is the mother of 2 nations, and that there's a great battle, so to speak, taking place inside of her body. The struggle between these 2 people is already going on in utero. So this is her response from God, which tells us, by the way, that absolutely women talk to God in the Bible. No question.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody ever asks, do women talk to God in the Bible? The answer is yes. And it's very clear that Rebekah talked to God and that God talked to her. So that's really, there's a lot happening there in that sentence. But one of the things that's happening there, folks, is that it is 100% telling us that women can, what can women do when it comes to relations as a spiritual being in Judaism? They can talk to God as easily, according to this, as a man, or as it's as possible as it is for a man. And she also, of course, again, learns that the younger son is going to be the one that is the one that you've got to kind of recognize, right? So she knows. She's told by God. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first one emerged red, like a hairy mantle all over. So they named him Esau, which really has as its root this idea of hair. Esau. That's one of his names, but of course that's not the only name. He also was Admoni, that he is also reddish, ruddy, He's red. Then his brother emerged, holding on to the heel of Esau. So they named him Jacob, which means heel. That's the name for heel. So it says, Ba'ekev Esau. He held the Akev Esau. He held Esau's heel. So his name was Yaakov. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. So it's very clear, not a hard math problem. 20 years they waited to have children. Now, what's interesting, of course, is that Isaac, unlike his father Abraham, unlike his son Jacob, when he can't have kids with Rachel, he doesn't turn to a handmaiden to have a child with, which I think shows us a few things about Isaac, obviously, and maybe also very importantly with his relationship with Rebecca and who Rebecca was. First of all, Rebecca doesn't say, "Hey, I can't have a kid. Go have a kid with my servant." He doesn't do that. So there's something special about Isaac, which again, this is not easy for them. I mean, he has to go pray to God to have a child. I mean, he actually has to do something in order. It's like almost like a miracle, which is strange because God's been telling these people, you're going to have as many children as there are sands on the seashore and stars in the sky. And yet they seem to be having such a problem. So it's interesting that they have this promise that they know God's told them, but it doesn't come easy. All right. And now it tells us this about when the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors. But Jacob was a mild man who stayed in the camp. Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah favored Jacob. And that's what we know about the story of the childhood of these guys. That's really all we know. And then we're going to get into their interaction. So that's what we know about the way their parents felt about them. So I will tell you, there's a lot there in those two sentences. There's a lot there. One of the most important points, of course, is that Esau and Jacob are very different. They're twins, but they're almost like opposites. And they really are. It's this weird, they look different, they acted different. Now, I guess you could say it'd even be weirder, maybe in some ways, if they looked the same, if they were identical twins, but they're not identical twins. They're fraternal twins, and they don't look alike. And they act different. More important, they act different. They are different. They have different values. And again, the rabbis point out that Esau is already like doing things that are not becoming of a Jew, namely hunting. Because remember, it's not that killing a deer is not kosher. It is. Deer is kosher. Rabbit aren't kosher. A lot of things that people hunt that aren't kosher. But deer is kosher as an animal, except when you hunt it, it's no longer kosher, because if you don't kill it immediately, if it suffers, you can't eat it as kosher meat. It becomes treif. So if you slaughter venison in a kosher way, it's completely kosher. And there are places that serve kosher venison. But if you see kosher venison on a menu, it means that it was farm-bred venison. Esau is already, again, nobody has told the Jewish people at this point. I want to make it clear. Esau has not necessarily ever been given direction on what he should have done. Right? You haven't missed it yet. We haven't gotten to the how to kill an animal kind of thing, which by the way, you don't really get in the Torah anyways. It doesn't specifically say this is the way you kill an animal. That's later on in the rabbinic period. We start to get clear, learning on how to do this. But it's definitely, It's definitely not Jacob's behavior. And of course, the rabbis interpret it not just that Jacob was at the tent, was in a camp, was at the camp, that he is. They interpreted the word camp or ohalim, which are tents, that these are places of study, that the tents were actually the tents of his ancestors, Shem and Eber, who were teachers. So that Jacob is the archetypical Jew. He's a student. He's the rabbi. He's the doctor. He's the guy who's in class. Whereas the other brother, Esau, is out there playing sports, is running around with guys on the street. He's in a gang. All those kinds of archetypes of the other side. This becomes a very important idea of what is Jewish behavior and what isn't Jewish behavior. And so to this day, if you're in a religious household and a kid comes home and says, I want to do sports, I don't want to study so much, the father's response would be, or maybe the mother's too, don't behave like Esau. Don't be like this. You want to be like Jacob. You want to be like our ancestor. And so these stereotypes still exist within the Jewish community. And I've talked about this. We've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. That really the healthier aspect of Judaism would be to reconcile these and to make sure that Jews, especially Jewish men, don't have this stereotype that if you're an outdoorsman and if you're a tough guy, that you're not Jewish. That shouldn't be the way we treat Jews. And to some extent, Israel changed that, right? Because when Israel established itself as a country of people who fought and who worked in the fields and who were not afraid, all of a sudden Esau and Jacob started to become reunited. And there is this idea in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism that Jacob and Esau were meant to be one person, that something happened. I don't want to blow people's minds too much, but there is this understanding that a mistake happened in utero, and maybe it's because the parents didn't have enough faith, that they kind of rushed things, that the child was going to be born, but that if this Jacob Esau child could have been born as one child, that it would have been healthier for us. That if these sides could have been united in one person, the history of the Jewish people would have been much different. It's a weird revisioning of what it means, but it's a more modern, first of all, it's a more modern psychological approach to this, but it's also kind of a recognition that, maybe being, fit and also thinking about our bodies and, not just studying might be a better way of living. And so a lot of that has to do with Israel. And a lot of it has to do with this understanding that Jews cannot be weak. We have to be able to defend ourselves, and being mild, which is not necessarily the translation that you have to go with. It says he's an ish tam, which is also simple or pure. It could be somebody who's more pure of heart. It's the same word that we have for Noah, that this is a person who's, a good person, a simple person, a pure person. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's mild. They definitely went with that vision in the translation, that this is a very mild-mannered and kind of weak guy. But it's not necessarily the way that it should be. And remember that as we read today, that this dichotomy between Jacob and Esau, it almost becomes an obsession for the rabbis, because Esau represents the Roman Empire eventually. So, and then later on Christians, which is this interesting idea that like they're the flip side. They're close to us, real close. Like we shared the womb together, but they flipped it. And it's like they're our doppelganger, but living a life that we shouldn't live. They're the ones, like all of our powers have been harnessed in another way. And it's like the ultimate arch villain, in the sense that they're really powerful. And the rabbis and Jews recognize that, hey, the Romans are really powerful. They must have something going on. So they really they really went to kind of taking this as almost a mythic struggle between the possibilities of what happens with between a, a a strong person and a wise person. My things are going off. My alarms. So keep that in mind as we read these stories of Jacob and Esau. That is part of what the commentary and the interpretation was. That this is not just about two people; these are about two nations, and you'll see it as we read this. Someone else want to say something?
Yeah, Rabbi.
Yeah.
You haven't put this on Facebook, have you?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, wait a second. It didn't work?
I don't think so.
Oh, I started seeing it come out, and you know what? It's like I saw it and then I went off the screen, but now I don't see it up there. You know what? I thought it was. Hold it 1 second. You know what? It was on and then it went off. I actually saw it streaming and then.
Rabbi, can you tell how many people watch on Facebook?
It's difficult to say. Like usually there's 2 or 3, 4 people watching it live on Facebook with us, and then like somewhere during the rest of the week, another 100 or so people end up watching part of it. So yeah, but thanks for checking that, Mike. It was not. It said it was going, and then it wasn't. The persistent stream key is being used.
On my computer, it said it's now streaming live on Facebook.
I'm confused by this. Sorry, folks.
It says
it says it was. I don't know. I apologize. Sorry, folks. But thanks for checking. Yeah, it's on. It's on. Thank you. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to tell you something. So I was studying this portion with the kids in the Hebrew school, and I love doing this. I love looking at this portion with kids, especially kids who have siblings. And most of our kids do have, our Hebrew school kids do have siblings. And I love looking at this portion with the kids, especially today we had 2 that have older siblings that already have a sibling that already was in Hebrew school. And then I think one had one that didn't have, that has younger, and then whatever. There was a mix. It was a mix of some had kids who have older brothers and sisters, and some didn't, and some were the younger. So I love looking at this portion with them, because kids, including my kids, and maybe you did as kids, they're always saying, so-and-so is your favorite child, right? You know, they're always hitting you with that. You love so-and-so more than me, right? And it's normal for kids to try to go through that, you know, and say every time that their parent doesn't give them something that they want, that their sibling is more favored. And you hear that as a parent, it hurts, right? You know, well, it should hurt, I guess, because, you know, I love the reaction that kids have, because I had the same reaction when I read this. You know, it seems like one parent likes one kid more. Well, it says so. One kid liked one parent more, and one liked the other kid, you know, and so my point about this is well, one of the points I always want to make is that I always feel that this says something special about Rebecca, because it says that Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game. And you've heard me say this, but every time we read this portion, I have to put this point out there. Isaac's love for Esau is conditional on something, the food that he gets, the hunt. He likes the flavor of the food that he brings back. He likes something that Esau does for him. Rebecca, on the other hand, it just says she loves Jacob. And I always felt that was unconditional love. And even more importantly, I always read it this way. And it's my interpretation. It may not be the right interpretation, but I always read it this way, that Rebecca loved Jacob maybe to compensate for the fact that she had a husband who really favored one of the kids. And so what did she do? She compensated. She gave Jacob more of her time because she had to. She knew as a parent that she had to step in and pick up the slack. And so I always read this as kind of another great thing about Rebecca is that she got that. She saw that she had to do something because her son wasn't getting the same kind of attention from her husband. So I always loved that. Now, of course, Rebecca also knows that Jacob has been favored by God, been chosen by God. So you could also say that Rebecca had some insider information, if you will, about Jacob. She knew something about him. But it doesn't say that. It doesn't say Rebecca loved him because God told her to. It just says she loved him. So I always like that she may be compensated. But obviously there's a dysfunction here, which is that you have a house that's divided. And it's not a good thing. It's not, you can imagine that this didn't play out well at the dinner table, where one child keeps going to one parent and the other one goes to the other parent, because the brothers clearly didn't get along, as we're about to see, which means that the parents must not have gotten along very well, at least sometimes, at least when it came to the kids. And the kids might have driven a wedge between Rebecca and Isaac because they were taking a different kid's side. You could see that happening. I could see it happening because it happens. It happens. So there's something there that's very powerful about the human family and the dynamic. And so as I talked to the kids today about this, they love this portion. It was really speaking to them, and especially now. And I was telling the kids, and I'll tell you what I told them at the end, but they see this, they read it, they feel what it's like to be around the table with this family because they identify. But of course they identify with the kids as a kid. I told the kids, I said, as a parent, I read this now and I'm like, I identify with the parents. I identify with Isaac and Rebecca, trying to figure out, how do I make my kids all feel loved? How do I not make one of them feel favored? How do we create a situation where each of my kids feels like I'm connecting with them and not because I'm compensating for the other parent or that I'm favoring one of the other kids. And so it's, we joke about it in our house. We kind of, we don't ignore the birth order stuff. And we talk openly about it. So we talk about it. If somebody feels like we don't say, well, that's a lie, or that's not true. We talk about how they feel. And so we try to not let them feel one's favored, that each one of them has a different relationship. But the hardest thing, of course, for a parent is when you do something different for one child than you did for the other, because you're a parent and you can't treat all your kids the same because they're not the same. When kids say, but you did something for that child and you didn't do it for me, because you didn't need to have that done for them. Hey, you know what's an example of that? We got our daughter Shira a dog. And my other kid said, why did you do that? Rachel said it because she didn't want a dog, period. And Dina said, you never got me a dog. And so the issue is that I got to the kid, when we talked about this with the kids, I said, the bottom line, kids, is this is a very difficult period of time right now for families to be in the house with people all the time and to be under this enormous stress of proximity. It's very hard. And so I told them, I said, you guys, and I'm talking to kids, I said, you have to do your part to create shalom bayit, to create peace in your house. And so I know it's a hard time right now. I know that you're tripping over each other and you're always in each other's space, but you have to respect each other and you have to do your best to know and to admit that this is a hard time, that we may have to make some adjustments. We may have to figure out, hey, you know what? If somebody says they need space, let them go to another room and leave them alone. You don't have to be in their face all the time. As a matter of fact, maybe you should leave them alone right now, and we have to be more cognizant of that now, that that people don't get to go around, that people don't have, the same kind of space and the opportunities to go to different places, to just go out, when they need some space. And so it was a real important discussion we had with the kids today. And it was good to be able just to have an opportunity to remind them that, yeah, this is tough. This is really a tough time for families. And to acknowledge that, to let them know that it's okay to talk about it, that it's okay to acknowledge it, and let's be open about it. And what was interesting is one of the young women, who's a very astute and very, very, very dynamic young person, she said, Rabbi, a lot of times when we talked about Isaac loving Esau, I said to the kids, I said, so what would you say is what's the modern version of this, right? What's the modern way? And right away they knew. It's like, oh yeah, Esau's like the good athlete, right? He's the one who's good at sports, right? And Jacob's the good student. They see it. I mean, it's clear. It's right there, right? So we've talked about it, and why. So how do parents connect with this? And so this one young girl said, parents oftentimes like what they like, those qualities that they see in their children that they have. They see it in their children, and they like that, and they like that child because of it. Like, so if they see this child and say, oh, this child's like me, they identify with it. Very good point. So that's a great point. But I said to her, and I said to all the kids, I said, but think about this. From what we know about Isaac's life, he's not like Esau. He's not a skillful hunter. He's not a man of the outdoors. It doesn't seem like he's like that. It seems like maybe he's even more like Jacob. But, and even more so, this was a guy who got tied up as a young man. He was tied up and bound by his own father. There's nothing more emasculating and more humbling and more, more traumatic than that. It's very easy to imagine that Isaac never was a man of the outdoors, maybe a man who was afraid to be out a lot, outdoors. So I said to them, I said, sometimes parents actually live, I didn't say the word vicariously, but I said, sometimes that parent who never was a good athlete, when they have a child who is a good athlete, they get excited by it because maybe they didn't have those skills, right? Maybe they didn't have those abilities, or maybe in another way, with other intellectual skills that they didn't have, but that they identify, or with a talent, or with a musical gift that the child has, that maybe they identify with that, or not that they had it, but that they wish they had it. So I said that also sometimes happens with parents, is that they sometimes identify with things that they'd like to have. Mm-hmm. So it's just a wonderful couple of lines that anyone who's been part of a family, you read this and you go, yeah, family dynamics, they're complicated. And if you're a child, if you're a parent, if you're a sibling, it's not always easy. Mm-mm. It's not always easy. It takes work. And most importantly, it takes some mindfulness. It takes some awareness that when you're dealing with somebody else, even somebody who you share the same genetic information with, you have to remember that you're different people. You live different lives, and you have different agendas, and that you have, as much as you have things in common, you're going to live a different life. And you have to respect that, and you have to understand that people are not going to be like you. And at some point, you have to love the person for who they are. A lot of stuff happening in those two lines, folks. It's just so powerful. And it doesn't end when our parents die, or when our siblings die, or, these feelings, you know this, Joyce.
Yep, I do know that.
You unfortunately lost a parent at a very young age, but you never stop that shadow of the parent. You always wonder, you always think about it, right?
It had an impact on me my whole life.
So there's something very powerful about the Torah reminding us of the human condition. And folks, the human condition is, we're part of a family. Mm-hmm. For better or worse, we have to come to terms with that. We have to, and look, and you also know about it from your work as a therapist and working with people and sharing and understanding who they are. It's That's why it's right. It's the stereotypical conversation. So tell me about your parents, right? That's not. I mean, I know that's not what you do,
Right.
but that's the ultimate therapy question, right? So let's talk about your parents today, right? So and I know you don't do that. I'm saying it completely as the stereotype and as the
However, it comes up whether you ask the questions or not.
yeah. And that's why I don't want to belabor this, but you could live here in this portion and just think about how timeless this is and how powerful the Torah is, because it reminds us of that. So we're going to now read the story. And this is what happens when these two brothers interact, because so far, all we've been reading in these first lines is the editorial comment about the setup. And now we're going to get to the good stuff. Well, not the good stuff, but the actual discussion, the dialogue, and the narrative. And here we go. And you know this story. It's a pretty well-known story. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the open, famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff to gulp down, for I'm famished," which is why he was named Edom. The red stuff, right? The red stuff is there, is red, is actually there twice. Min ha'adam hazeh. Give me some of that red stuff. That red stuff. So he's called Edom. That's the nickname. And again, the name of the nation of Esau were the Edomites. And that's where it also comes from. His red hair in one version. And here we have the red
stew.
And what does Jacob say? Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "I'm at the point of death. So what use is my birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "No, swear to me first." So he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob then gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank, and he rose and went away. Thus did Esau spurn the birthright. Now that's the story. The next story that's the end of that story. So this is, remember, this is a two-parter, because everyone thinks this is the blessing and the birthright. They're the same thing. They're two different things. There's a birthright story, and then there's a blessing story.
Mm-hmm.
There's two things that happen to Esau and Jacob. Jacob here gets hold of the physical inheritance of Isaac. Now, again, we always talk about this. This is the law of primogeniture. The law was the law, and it was the law even in much of the world, and still is in some places. The oldest child, the oldest son usually, got twice as much as every other child, right? So two children gets divided in three. The oldest gets 2/3 and the younger one gets 1/3. However you look at it, 9 kids get split 10 ways. One gets 2/10 and the other get 1/10. It is twice as much to the oldest child. So it's a big deal. And the fact that they're literally minutes apart, seconds apart, doesn't matter. They come out together, doesn't get split twice, doesn't get split in twos, doesn't get split in half for the twins, gets split in thirds, and he gets 1/3. So $100,000, Esau gets 66 and he gets 33. Doesn't seem fair, especially again when you're a twin. But that's the law. But here Esau gave up that claim. So whatever claim there was for the inheritance, he just did it for the price of a bowl of soup. Now, it does say that he also got bread and he also got some drink with it too, which also seems like Jacob threw in a little bonus. The point is that Esau spurns his birthright. He doesn't value it, which the rabbis point out, and it does seem from the text, he doesn't seem to care. If he's gonna sell his birthright for a bowl of soup, then what would he have done? What bad choices would he have made with the money when he makes such bad choices before he has the money?
Value system. You got to look at the value system. What did he value?
Yep. And so this seems to be again, indication that Esau is he's just not going in the right direction. So now I will tell you two things. Number one, with that money comes responsibility, which, by the way, again, Esau may not have lived up to because he didn't have the values. When you got that extra money as the inheritor, your responsibility was to take care of the family with that money. So it wasn't just like, oh, I got this extra money, it's all mine. As the oldest child, when your father died, your job, for example, was to take care of your mother. So this idea that, yeah, well, it's just dumb luck. He gets twice as much just because he was born a couple seconds earlier. It doesn't work that way. There actually is a responsibility that comes with it, which actually, you know, sometimes if you were the second or third oldest child, you're like, you know what, just give me the money. I don't want to worry about it. Just give me the inheritance. I can walk away. I don't have to worry about running the estate, because essentially becoming the inheritor, the prime inheritor, meant that you were the executor, that you were also the sustainer of the other rest of the family, maybe the daughters and the wife, the other parts of the family that you're responsible for. So it wasn't just you got a chunk of money. I want to make that clear. So that's, we sometimes forget that. And actually, I haven't talked about that many times, is that it's not quite as easy as it appears. And again, Esau may not have lived up to his responsibilities based on his behavior. There's another issue here too, which is that Esau isn't we don't know what he was doing for sure, because the rabbis point out that once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau comes in from the open, famished. It says min hasadeh. He comes in from the field. And the rabbinic interpretation of that is that he wasn't out in the field. He wasn't out farming or hunting or watching the sheep, so to speak. He was out playing the field. Folks, we use the same imagery in our own language today, right? When we say playing the field, there's an understanding that Esau was out sleeping around town, that he was already not behaving well as a young man, and it wasn't just hunting, and that actually the hunting that's alluded to earlier is also this idea that he's out with the ladies. Yeah, that was part of the subtext of what the rabbis read into it. Now you could say, he's just an irresponsible young man. He just doesn't have good values. But they went a step further, which is that it doesn't seem like, it seems very dangerous, his lifestyle. And so they are, we definitely are left with Esau is not deserving of this birthright. So as much as Jacob seems to, I wouldn't say deceive him or steal it from him, he didn't care. And it also doesn't appear that he is going to make good use of it if he does get it. So keep that in mind. Any questions or any points on this? Because now, chapter 26, we go in a different direction. We will come back to this because the portion does end with the blessing. So we get the birthright and we get the blessing in the same portion. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will. But now we shift gears. We actually go back to a portion that we actually, to this portion that we do get about a little info about Isaac. This is pretty much the only, and you've seen it, folks. If you've been here the last few weeks, we haven't heard anything about Isaac. We read about the Akedah, which is chapter 22. That's only 4 chapters ago. Then we read about the chapters of his mother dying and Abraham getting a grave. We read about Eliezer going to Aram and getting the wife for him, which goes on for 80 something verses. And now we have 16 verses about his birth, about Isaac's kids, which really isn't anything about him other than he asked God for a child. That's the only thing it says he does. We don't hear a conversation. We don't hear any conversations between him and his kids. We don't hear a conversation between him and his wife. It's not there. There's more verses about finding Rebecca. By the way, I would actually, I don't know, Rebecca doesn't say that much either, but that story with Rebecca may have more lines in it than anything we get about Isaac, except for this. And this is this one story we get about Isaac, chapter 26. And this is it, folks. You'll see. You'll see what I'm talking about. And remember, him getting a wife is not him getting a wife. It's Eliezer bringing back a wife for him. He's completely passive in the story. So his passivity and his lack of dialogue, again, further gives us the idea that he's acted upon rather than an actor. So it says there was a famine in the land, aside from the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. Well, that usually tells us something bad is about to happen, because when there was a famine during Abraham's time, that's when they went down to Egypt. Well, we also know there's going to be a famine later on during Jacob's time when they go down and reunite with Joseph. Well, here's another famine. So in this time, Isaac went to Avimelech, the king of the Philistines in Gerar. So remember, his father also went to Avimelech, and we don't know that it's the same Avimelech. Avimelech is a title like Pharaoh. It means my father, the king, father king, or father king, if you will. And he's the king of the Philistines, either a Philistine king or maybe a Canaanite king, but he's king of the area, Gentile king of the area. The Lord had appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I point to you. So in this case, Isaac is told, don't go down. And reside in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I will assign all these lands to you and to your heirs, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. So he's told, this is all your land. Don't leave. Remember, Abraham went down to, Abraham lived in Syria, went to Israel, then goes down to Egypt and then comes back. Jacob lives in Israel, goes up to Syria, then goes back to Israel, and then goes to Egypt and dies in Egypt. Isaac's the only one who never leaves the land of Israel. And he's fulfilling God's promise. I will make your heirs as numerous as the stars of heaven and assign to your heirs all these lands, so that all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by you, your heirs. Inasmuch as Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my laws, and my teachings. So here it says that, he kept the laws. Now, we don't know what those laws are. They haven't gotten the laws. But again, it could be the one-to-one commandments and rules that Abraham gets from God. And it says that Isaac stayed in Gerar, that area, which is in southern Israel. Now, when the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, she is my sister. Wow, where have we heard this before?
Yeah.
We only heard Abraham do it twice. Well, here's Isaac's turn. Now, in this case, definitely not his sister. We talked about how maybe Abraham didn't lie, like maybe Sarah was his half sister. Not here. We know who she is. We know that Rebecca is. We know who her father and mother are. We know they're not sister and brother. Here, he's clearly lying. And it says he was afraid to say my wife, thinking the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebecca, for she is beautiful. And that's, by the way, the translation. Ki tovat mar'eh, that she is not just, that just doesn't mean she's good, she's tov. Mar'eh means she's beautiful to look at. Mar'eh means to look at, physically beautiful. When some time had passed, Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, looking out of the window, saw Isaac fondling his wife, Rebekah. Now, that's an interesting translation, and I'm not going to say that it's wrong. It could be actually a really good translation of it. But folks, we got to point out for a moment the Hebrew lesson here. The line, it says, Hineh, the Hineh, here, Hineh, right? Hineh Yitzchak metzachek et Rivka ishto. It's Yitzchak metzachek. Isaac is playing with his wife, or Isaac is playing with Rebecca, his wife. So again, it doesn't just say Rebecca, but his wife Rebecca. They're still married, and he's playing with her. And again, it's a play on the name. It's playing on the play. Yitzchak, to play, to be playful, to laugh. Metzachek is playing with his wife. Now, again, the interpretation here and the translation gives us, they're not playing Yahtzee, not playing chess. There's something going on here that's physical, right? That's intimate. Well, it kind of makes sense because the reaction here isn't one just, they're doing something that a brother and sister would be doing. Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, so she is your wife? Why then did you say she's my sister? And Isaac said to him, because I thought I might lose my life on account of her. So he tells Abimelech, I thought you'd kill me. Abimelech said, what have you done to us? One of the people might have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Abimelech then charged all the people, saying, anyone who molests this man or his wife shall be put to death. Well, that's pretty nice. Now, of course, what is going on with Isaac that he thinks that these people are going to kill him and take his wife? Well, clearly, he has reason to believe that. He knows what these people are capable of. The assumption here isn't he's talking crazy. He's not paranoid. They really are out to get him, right? That's the old joke, right? I'm not paranoid. I don't know. I mean, he's given protection, but he didn't feel protected, and neither did Abraham, his father. So it's not over. Isaac sowed in that land and reaped 100-fold in the same year. The Lord had blessed him. And the man grew richer and richer until he was very wealthy. He acquired flocks and herds and a large household, so that the Philistines envied him. So he's given protection, he's given a blessing, and God blessed him. So not only does he not have to worry about the Philistines, but God's actually making him very wealthy. So he's doing really well. But what happens is that this turns the Philistines against him. They become jealous of him. So what do? They stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham, filling them with earth. So what did they do? They filled up his wells, which is literally like saying, we are going to destroy your economic livelihood by not giving you access to your own wells. Now remember, Abraham kind of lived as a resident alien in the land. He didn't take ownership of the wells. He didn't say, these are my wells. He was living there with this recognition that he was not powerful enough to say, this is the land that God promised me. So he's got to be kind of careful about his existence. And Isaac is in the same situation. He can't go to the people and just say, I own these wells. As a matter of fact, I own everything here. You have no right to do this to me. He's kind of stuck, and he shouldn't be. But this is what they try to do to hurt him. And again, hurting him, it's just to hurt Isaac. It's just to hurt Isaac. It doesn't make them wealthier. I mean, I guess it does in that it creates a supply and demand situation that's better for them, but they're doing it by destroying someone else's livelihood. So it's a terrible thing. And Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you have become far too big for us. So Isaac departed from there and encamped at the Wadi of Gerar. So he went outside of the area, the town, and he was out in the area outside, in the kind of the wilderness, if you will, by Nahal Gerar. And here's what it says. Isaac dug anew the wells which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, and which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham's death. And he gave them the same names that his father had given them. We'll pause in a second. But when Isaac's servants digging in the wadi found there a spring of water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen and said, "This water's ours." He named that well Esek because they contended with him. And when they dug another well, they disputed over that one also. So he named it Sitnah. He moved from there and dug yet another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called it Rehoboth, saying, "Now at last the Lord has granted us ample space to increase in the land." So what's going on here in this story of the wells? They finally get to a place where the people are going to leave them alone. They finally find a well where they'll be left alone, which is a place called Rehoboth. We have a place in Israel today called Rehoboth, which is, town in outside of, it's a major city, Rehoboth. But there's also beach, right? Rehoboth Beach, right back east. It means far away. That's what it means. It means a distance. Rehoboth means a distance. And he gets enough distance between him and the Philistines. It's a powerful image, though, of what Isaac has to, the way Isaac has to become independent, because things aren't easy for him, in the sense that things are going well, and what happens? The Philistines turn on him. They start to make life hard for him, and so what does he do? He figures, well, you know what? I'll dig up the wells of my father, right? I'll be able to find those places, and those got to be mine. Those have to be mine, because they were my dad's. So that they must be mine. I must be able to get them. But that doesn't work. And so eventually he has to dig his own wells. And there is this kind of balance between understanding that we have to draw from our tradition, but at some point we also have to do our own work. We can't just repeat what other people have said before. At some point we have to make it our own. Now, partly Isaac doesn't have a choice, but there is this kind of understanding that we're only going to find our place when we've created enough distance and enough independence and enough of our own individuality that we can say, this is mine. This is my well. This is where I'm going to draw strength from. Now, we recognize that you have to have both. I mean, he was sustained by both, but at some point he had to draw his own well. He had to make his own wells. And I definitely think about that myself. I mean, that is definitely something that I've been thinking about over the last months, of my own relationship with my father. But it's something that I think is a very powerful image. And actually, one of my favorite books on Genesis is this one right here, called Our Father's Wells, by Peter Pitzela. It's kind of a funny name, right? Peter Pitzela. But he's a psychotherapist, bibliodrama. He actually kind of invented the bibliodrama. And he takes Genesis and he kind of helps us use it to understand ourselves. And it's quite a book. This is a newer version of it. This is the 2018 version. But yeah, the original one came out in 96. I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a good book on Genesis. Very powerful and very readable, and it's quite emotional. And again, he's a therapist who kind of takes on this role of helping us understand Genesis in a new way, or maybe again some of the ways that I had an opportunity to study with him about 20 years ago, right after he wrote that book. Yeah, I had a chance to study with him right after he. I think about 96 was when I got to study with. I got to do a session with him, and again, he is quite a. He basically kind of invented bibliodrama. He's 79 years old. He is here. I'll show you his. I'll share with you a little bit of his bio. So I love the fact that he used this as a title for his book, and kind of not a lot of people have written about this. I've written about this incident. So he does bibliodrama and PhD from Harvard, and he was the director of psychodrama services at Four Winds Hospital in Katona, up in Westchester. And yeah, it's quite powerful. Yeah, I met him right about 96, 97, probably 97 is when I got to do a session with him. So yeah, that's a little bit about our Father's wells, and again, the fact that you could take a text about the wells, and he does. I mean, he takes this text and he kind of analyzes it and helps us understand what this section can teach us. It's really, really, really good. And again, it's not a section, it's a section. Chapter 26 is probably one of those chapters of Genesis, like chapter 36, which has the genealogies of Esau, where you're like, what's this even in the Bible for? But he draws stuff out of these wells, and that's why he called it that. So what Isaac does from there, he goes up from Beersheba, which is in the south, and it says, that night the Lord appeared to him. I am the God of your father Abraham. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and increase your offspring for the sake of my servant Abraham. So he built an altar there and invoked the Lord by name. And Isaac pitched his tent, and his servants started digging a well. Which, by the way, again, a lot of well digging. But it also says, I will bless you and your offspring for the sake of my servant Abraham. It doesn't say I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for your father. Which seems, by the way, a little interesting in itself, that he doesn't say, I'm doing it because I promised you, but, but Isaac doesn't say anything either, by the way. Isaac doesn't say, he doesn't really say anything to God. As a matter of fact, I don't know that there's actually a conversation back and forth. Well, there isn't really with Jacob either, but again, he's very passive with God too, Isaac. So here's what happens. Avimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzad his counselor and Phicol, the chief of his troops. So Avimelech comes to him with his two highest officials. Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, seeing that you've been hostile to me and you've driven me away from you? And they said, we see now plainly the Lord has been with you, and we thought, let there be a sworn treaty between our two parties, between you and us. Let's make a pact with you that you will not do us harm, just as we have not molested you, you have always would molest you, but have always dwelt kindly with you and sent you away in peace. From now on, be you blessed of the Lord. And they made a feast and they ate and drank. Early in the morning, they exchanged oaths. Isaac bade them farewell, and they departed from him in peace. And it says, the same day Isaac's servants came and told him that the well they had dug, we have found water. And he named it Shiva. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. So here's another reason why it's called Beersheba. It is the well of oath. It's the well of an oath. an oath between Isaac and the Philistines, that they're not going to attack him. He's not going to attack them, and they should have peace. And it comes from Beersheba, the place that is known again as the Well of Oath. Okay, so that's what the word Sheva means. Like we said before, this word Sheva means seven, but it also means oath. So the Well of the Seven, maybe it's the Well of the Seven, but here it says it's the Well of the Oath. What was it that happened to Avimelech where he realized that maybe he shouldn't have sent Isaac away? Well, there's an understanding like maybe once Isaac left, everything started going to hell. The water stopped coming and they stopped having sheep, and sending him away may have said, look, let's get this guy away from us before he owns us. But the problem is that all their good luck left too. The point is that they try to get him back. They get him back. And this is the Beersheba explanation for why it's called Beersheba. So the chapter ends this way. And again, there's more coming. We're going to read the last part of this story, which is chapter 27. When Esau was 40 years old, he took to wife Judith, Yehudit, daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basmath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they were a source of bitterness to Isaac and Rebekah, both. So Esau marries at 40 years old, which, by the way, is the same age that his father got married at. So he doesn't get married young, old, same age, 40. And it's interesting that he takes to wife two Canaanite women. Now, this really is too much for Isaac and Rebekah. Maybe Isaac liked Esau before, but he's not happy now. And obviously Rebekah's not happy either. And it says Marat Ruach, that this was bitter spirit, which is translated as bitterness, but it was not good for the parents. The parents are not happy. So that's the way the chapter ends. So it has a lot to do, that chapter, with the other peoples in the land, the Philistines, the Canaanites, the fact that Isaac is kind of in a weak spot. His people are still small. His group, the nascent Hebrews, are too weak. And so they have to kind of live, if you will, at the mercy of their neighbors. Not a good situation. Not a situation, by the way, that Israel wants to be under. Israel doesn't want to be in a situation where other nations get to control their fate, whether it's water, as you see here, having their water be controlled, or their ability to have access to area or land that can protect them. So Israel still has this issue today. By the way, as we were exchanging email texts over the last couple of days, people saw the fact that Israel took out the leader of Al-Qaeda in Iran a few months ago. It just became public. I hope people understand what that meant, because it probably was an agreement that the United States actually told Israel either to do it. Israel offered to do it. Israel had an agreement with the United States that they would do it. As much as Israel doesn't like Al-Qaeda, these are people responsible for the death of Americans. Israel did not kill a terrorist who just hated Jews. They killed a terrorist who was responsible for the deaths of American, and more importantly, many more Africans who were killed in the attacks at the embassies in Kenya in 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. So understand that Israel used their own assets to take out al-Masri and risked the lives of those Israeli agents in Iran. You can't write this they did. They've tried to. Apple has a series right now called Tehran about Israeli operatives in Iran. But understand that Israel jeopardized the lives of those people and again, I'm glad Israel did it, but they did it to bring justice to these terrorists who were responsible for the death of American lives. So Israel is very much concerned with protecting its citizens, but also our citizens, American citizens, and making sure that those people are brought to justice. So I would very much like to see that movie one day about how that mission was accomplished. But I want people to remember that as much as Iran is embarrassed by this, they should be. The main reason why all of this could be happening is because there's about 500,000 Israelis who were raised either speaking Farsi, were born in Iran, or who have parents who were born in Iran who live in Israel today. And you know why they live there? Because the Iranians chased them away and threatened them and killed them. And so they found a homeland in Israel. And guess what? They all speak Farsi fluently. And so when they need to have an asset on the ground in Iran, guess what? We have thousands of Israelis that can go to Iran and blend in with the population. So when people talk about why it's probably not a good idea to turn on your local Jewish population, just understand that's why Israel was able to have assets in Iraq and Egypt during the 6-Day War, and now today in Iran. So all I can tell you is if Iran hadn't treated its Jewish community like that, those Israelis wouldn't have been there to learn, to be able to do what they had to do, which, again, we're not celebrating the death of evil people. We don't do that, even when they're evil. But we do recognize that Israel executed justice, which wouldn't have happened for what happened to the United States. So I want people to understand what happened, because it was a pretty significant thing. And there's so much more that's going on right now that it's not the most important thing. I don't want to I don't want to overblow it, but I do want you to know that was not done for Israel. That was done for the United States. And those people trained, by the way, their whole lives to do that one. Once that mission's done, they're gone. They have to leave the country, and they could be killed. But those people are done. They train their whole lives for that one mission, and then they have to go. They have to get out. So that was a one-time. Those people trained in some cases 20 years to do that one thing. Really, literally your whole life to do one thing. So let's read this last chapter, folks, shall we? So Isaac was old, and his eyes were too dim to see. He called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son." And he answered, Hineni. You knew it was coming. Folks, Esau is the one who says Hineni. Esau says it. It's pretty important that Esau says it. It's not Jacob. It's not. Isaac doesn't say Hineni. Abraham says Hineni to Isaac. Joseph says it to Jacob. It's a critical word, and Esau is the one who says it to his father. And of course, we learn right from the beginning that Isaac can't see. Now it says Isaac's also old. And we assume that Isaac is at this point, well, if his son's 40, we just read his son was married at 40, and his son, and he was 60 years old when he had a son. He's about 100 years old. So yeah, he's older. Now, by the way, he's not going to die. Seems like he's going to die, but according to the Bible, he lives for another 80 years. Now, that's the Torah says he lives 180. He lives longer than any of the other patriarchs. He's only married to one woman. He never leaves the land of Israel, and he lives longer than any of them, Isaac. But it does seem like at this point, he thinks he's going to die. And he said, "I'm old now, and I do not know how soon I may die." He says it. "Take your gear, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open and hunt me some game. Then prepare a dish for me, such as I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my innermost blessing before I die." Rebekah had been listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau had gone out into the open to hunt the game to bring home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I overheard your father speaking to your brother Esau, saying, bring me some game and prepare a dish for me to eat, that I may bless you with the Lord's approval before I die. Now, notice Rebekah does change the words a little bit, right? He says that I may give you my innermost blessing before I die. Rebekah says that I may bless you with the Lord's approval before I die. You notice that she changes it a little bit. She doesn't give him the exact words. She changes it. Now you can make the argument on the face of it. She's not fundamentally changing it. But what she does do is she rephrases it in such a way that this is not about your father. This is about God. Because even though it's Isaac's blessing, it says, I may bless you, meaning Isaac, as she's repeating this. It's with the Lord's approval, Lifnei Adonai. So Rebekah doesn't make this about Isaac alone. She's basically saying this is the moment of the spiritual connection between Abraham, now to Isaac, and then to you. And so you're going to have to get it. You're going to, my son, listen carefully as I instruct you. Go to the flock and fetch me 2 choice kids, and I will make of them a dish for your father such as he likes. Then take it to your father to eat, in order that he may bless you before he dies. So she says to him, I'm going to tell you what to do. She tells him, make him, you go get some of the goats, and we're going to make a dish. So while he's out there hunting, we're going to get a jump on this, and we're going to make the food. And then notice again the role that the food has in the story, in the narrative, how important the food is. This is the moment.
Let's see.
Yeah, this is the moment where history is going to be made over this meal. Now, what's Jacob's response? That's Rebekah. Here's Jacob's response. Jacob answered his mother, Rebekah. He doesn't say, hey, that's a bad idea. No, he doesn't start that way. He goes with the problem solving right away. But my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm smooth skinned. If my father touches me, I shall appear to him as a trickster and bring upon myself a curse, not a blessing. I'm going to get a curse. So he doesn't say no. He doesn't say, why would you want me to lie to my dad? He says, we're going to get caught, which is far different than saying it's a bad idea. He doesn't say that. He also doesn't say, he seems complicit right away. He's already thinking of what may go wrong, but he is planning. He's going along with the plan. He's scared because he doesn't want it to go. He doesn't want it to go south. He's saying this could be a problem. But his mother said to him, "Your curse, my son, will be upon me. Just do as I say, and go fetch them for me." So she says, "If you get cursed, curse is on me. It's not on you. It's my idea. I'll take responsibility. And if there's any divine curse, it'll be on me." He got them. And by the way, at this point, you remember what they do here. In addition to taking the meat to make the stew, they also, of course, use the skin, use the hide, right? But here, she doesn't even say, I'll tell you what we're going to do, how we'll trick him. She simply says, it doesn't matter. If it goes south, it's on me. She doesn't say, but let me problem solve with you. She simply says, the curse is on me. Just do it. Now, here's where we get it, though. He got them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared a dish such as his father liked. Rebekah then took the best clothes of her older son Esau, which were there in the house, and had her younger son put them on. So here, by the way, is the clothes. Now, everybody always focuses on the next part. And she covered his hands and the hairless part of his neck with the skins of the kids. So that's the part that everybody remembers, which is they figure out how to make him look hairy or feel hairy. I mean, say look hairy, feel hairy. You put the skins on. So, and it says, by the way, of those kids. So the goats serve two purposes, food and for the trick. But people forget that he also put on the clothes of Esau. Now, somebody tell me, what's that about? What's that about? What's that about? Why is he putting on Esau's clothes?
Maybe for the smell?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because if he can't see, it's not because they look a certain way. It's not like Esau always wore red. Well, we'd say he liked red, right? He's the red guy. He's always wearing red or blue, whatever the color he wears. Assumedly, it's not the way it looks because Isaac can't see. He can't see well enough to even know which son it is. But yes, Diane, he could smell the smell of Esau. That his senses could be fooled. It's a very powerful scene, by the way. I've talked to Orthodox Jews about this scene, by the way, especially for Hasidim, who dress a certain way. They'll tell you, sometimes you got to dress like Esau. They say that. They said that to me before. I remember years ago, years and years ago, so long ago. Actually, it was about 8 years ago, but it feels like it was 20 years ago. I remember it vividly. I'll never forget it. We were at a charter hearing for Albert Einstein. We got a charter approved in Ventura County, which we never opened, but we got one approved. We couldn't find a location, but it was in Ventura. And I went to this charter school hearing in front of the Ventura County Office of Education. And I was there, and there was a Chabad rabbi there, and I wasn't wearing a yarmulke, and he knew I was a rabbi. So he said, so he said to me, why aren't you wearing a yarmulke? And I looked over at him. I didn't say anything. I said nothing to him because he was there in our group that was testifying about it. And he didn't say anything, but he was there he wanted to see what would happen. And he wanted to support it. I didn't say anything to him. I looked over at him. Maybe I gave him a look like, are you serious? He said to me those words, sometimes you have to dress like Esau. So he said, sometimes you don't want to dress Jewish. And it was a really interesting discussion because it shows you that when you're in the mentality of the Orthodox world, when I dress like this, I'm dressing like Esau. I'm not dressing like a Jew in their mind. Now, again, I dress like this all the time. It's not an issue. I don't dress like a Hasid, but for them, those are the clothes of Esau. And it's interesting how that archetype, how those images are still playing out in our world, in our Jewish world. And there's still people who look at the world in these terms of Jacob and Esau. So sometimes Jacob has to wear Esau's clothes. So I'll never forget that conversation. It wasn't even a conversation, it was one-sided. I just looked over and he said, yeah, sometimes you dress like Esau. So this scene is so powerful. The smells, the food, the sensory aspects of this story are so powerful. And think about how reminiscent this is when Jacob will be fooled with a coat of many colors when it's ripped and brought to him with blood from a goat on the coat. The fooling of somebody with garments. And that's why you got to pay attention to the Torah. It's why you got to see these lines, because it's not just the goat, it's the garment that's used for this ultimate trick. And Jacob's going to be tricked the same way with a garment, with a coat of many colors. Just like he used a coat of his brother to trick his father, his kids are going to take the coat of Joseph and dip it in blood. The irony of that, folks, the irony of that scene, by the way, you see now why that scene is so powerful when it happens to Jacob, which we'll read in a few weeks, folks. So she put the food in the hands. She put it in the hands of Jacob, the dish and the bread that she had prepared. He went to his father and said, "Father, Avi." And he said, "Hineni." Now, they didn't even translate it here, which kind of bugs me. Hineni, which they translated as yes. It's not. It's Hineni. Yes, now Jacob's saying it. Now Isaac's saying it to Esau. Which of my sons are you? Miatab. Miatabani. Which of my sons? And Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I've done as you told me. Pray, sit and eat of my game, that you may give me your innermost blessing. Mm-hmm. So I will tell you, the rabbis like to point out that Jacob didn't lie, which of course he does lie, but they don't like the fact that he so overtly lies to his father. What they say that Jacob really said is, why Jacob says, I am Esau, your firstborn. Now, the obvious answer is he says, I am Esau, your firstborn. Why didn't he just say Esau? Why does he say Esau, your firstborn? And the rabbis like to point out that it says, Jacob said, it's me. Anochi. Anochi means it's me. It's I, right? But they read it this way. Esau is your firstborn. I have done as you told. So he doesn't really say, I'm Esau, your firstborn. You say, it's me. Esau is your firstborn. They really didn't like the fact that at this moment, this holy, holy moment, that Jacob lied, and they didn't like it. So they like putting a few commas, extra commas in there, which is that he says, oh, it's me. Oh, Esau is your firstborn. Seems pretty clear that he deceives his father. Isaac said to his son, how did you succeed so quickly, my son? And he said, because the Lord your God granted me good fortune. So here it seems pretty clear, because the story doesn't just say Jacob told his father that it's me. He says, his father says, how'd you get the game so quick? And Jacob does something even worse here. He invokes God in it. He brings God into it. He says, God was amazing. God gave me, I went out, sure enough, first thing I did, I hit this 10 point, whatever. I hit this beautiful deer and I got it. This buck and I got it and I brought it home. And God's wonderful. God's gave me this great good fortune. That's horrible. Because not only did you say I got lucky or I was blessed or, I got it real quick, Dad. God gave it to me. So it really is tough. It's tough to read because he just is burying himself in this lie. Isaac said to Jacob, come closer that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really Esau or not. So Isaac, it seems, isn't so sure. It seems like Isaac really isn't sure. So much so, folks, that the rabbis go even further, which is that Isaac allowed himself, was complicit in this moment. Isaac really did know what was happening. He just couldn't do it any other way. He knew he was being tricked. He went along with it so that he could be complicit and make this happen because he didn't know what to do otherwise. Isaac was too weak to simply say, Esau, you don't deserve it. I'm giving it to Jacob. Didn't do it. This was the only way he could do it. How do we know that? Or why would we know that? Or where would that even come from? Because he doesn't seem convinced. He never seems convinced that this is Esau. And what we already know is we read at the end of the last chapter, he's already pissed. He's already mad at Esau. Esau went out and got married to two, not one, but two Canaanite women. So he's already starting to turn on Esau. So maybe he did turn on Esau. Maybe Esau did give him the grounds to finally say, Esau's great at hunting, but you know what? He has bad values and I can't give him these blessings. It's possible. That is possible, folks. I'm not so sure when I've read this, the numerous times I've read it, I'm not so sure that Isaac ever is convinced that it really is Esau. I think he knows in the back of his mind. You decide, or read it in a few more dozen times and see what your feelings are. Jacob drew close to his father Isaac, who felt him and wondered. The voice is the voice of Jacob, yet the hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. Now that's the key verse, right? Because seems like he didn't recognize him. But it could also be that it didn't make sense. The things didn't align, right? And so it's possible. Look, I don't know. Let's read the whole thing and you decide. He asked, "Are you really my son Esau?" And he said, "I am." I mean, that's like, boom. I mean, again, are you really Esau? I am. Now, again, the rabbis interpret that as he doesn't say, I am Esau. He says, it's me. So when his father says, are you Esau? He goes, no, he says, it's me. I don't know. It seems pretty clear that he's saying he's Esau. He said, serve me and let me eat of my son's game, that I may give you my innermost blessing. So he served him and he ate, and he brought him wine and he drank. And then his father Isaac said to him, come close and kiss me, my son. He went up and he kissed him. And he smelled his clothes and he blessed him, saying, the smell of my son is like the smell of the fields that the Lord has blessed. So the smell is critical. And here's the blessing. May God give you of the dew of the heaven and the fat of the earth, abundance of new wine and grain. Let people serve you and nations bow to you. Be master over your brothers, and let your mother's sons bow to you. Cursed be those who curse you, blessed those who bless you. No sooner had Jacob left the presence of his father Isaac, after Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, that his brother Esau came back from his hunt. So this doesn't say it happened the next day or later that day. Literally, he goes out of one exit, the other son comes in the other the entrance. He too prepared a dish and brought it to his father, and he said to his father, let my father sit up and eat of his son's game, that you may give me your innermost blessing. His father Isaac said to him, who are you? And he said, I am your son, Esau, your firstborn. And Isaac was seized with a very violent trembling. Who was it then, he demanded, that hunted game and brought it to me? Moreover, I ate of it before you came, and I blessed him. Now he must remain blessed. Now, the response that Isaac has here is that he's trembling. Trembling. Is it out of fear? Is he overacting in this moment? The word is used twice. It's emphasized. Vayichared Yitzchak Harada. He is Gedolah, by the way. It's triple emphatic if you want. And actually, it's quadruple emphatic. Ad me'od. So it's a trembling. It's Isaac trembled with a great and violent trembling. So some people would take the impression that he's overdoing it. He starts shaking, but maybe he went a little too far. So he's maybe acting a little bit because, again, he doesn't really know what to do with Esau other than to tremble here. And not just to like tremble inside, but like, shake his body, like this, like that. So it's possible. I don't know. I will tell you that this root, chared and charedah, that's the root for Haredi, which is what we call ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel. We call them the Haredi Jews. These are tremblers. That's what the word Haredi means. It doesn't mean religious. It doesn't mean black hat. It doesn't mean Orthodox. It means those who tremble, tremblers, which of course is trembling before God. That's the term that they prefer to call themselves, tremblers. I mean, I want you to know that. That's what they're called, tremblers. That's the term that they're used. They don't call them Orthodox. Well, sometimes they call them observant Jews, but that's different than Haredi. Haredi are black hatters. These are people that live in Mea Shearim and that live an ultra-Orthodox lifestyle, really the ultra-Orthodox, not observant. We're talking about ultra-Orthodox. They're called Haredi. And what are they doing? They're saying that they're like, and to some extent, Isaac, that they are tremblers like our ancestor Isaac. He's their archetype. He's their hero. So it's got to stick, though. Isaac says, doesn't matter. I've blessed him, and that's the blessing, and that's where it goes. And here's this very powerful scene. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst into a wild and bitter sobbing. Same emphasis. He cried a bitter cry. He said to his father, "Bless me too." But he answered, "Your brother came with guile and took away your blessing." And Esau said, "Was he then named Jacob, that he might supplant me?" Akev, again, Vayakevni. Now I will be supplanted. The heel is really the heel. First he took away my birthright, and now he's taken away my blessing. And he added, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Don't you have a blessing for me?" Now, you could ask yourself, why would Isaac have to go along with this? And I will make the argument thus. Maybe Isaac was scared of his son Esau. Maybe this was the only way he could get away with not giving him the blessing unless he went along with this trick. In the back of his mind, he's worried that if he goes along with it overtly, not, saying, "Yeah, well, it's just the way it has to be, son." God knew that you weren't the son, that maybe his life was in danger. I mean, he's very old in the sense that he's very frail, can't see. He's at his son's, the whim of his son. If his son wants to kill him right now, he's dead, just like that. possible. Isaac answered, saying to Esau, I have made him master over you. I've given him all his brothers for servants and sustained him with grain and wine. What then can I do for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, father? Bless me too, father. And I mean, think about what he just says, bless me too, father. And he keeps saying the word father to him. Father. Have you but one blessing? Father, bless me too, father. I mean, he doesn't, this is a very powerful scene. And it says he wept. Now, as much as Esau didn't care about the birthright, the physical, material possessions, he does seem very concerned with this blessing. He believes in the blessing, which means even if this guy doesn't believe in God, which we don't know what Esau believed. He definitely didn't live like he believed in God, but he definitely believed in this blessing. He's crying. Very powerful scene, folks. And his father Isaac answered him, saying to him, see, your abode shall enjoy the fat of the earth and the dew of the heaven above. You'll be okay. If by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restive, you shall break his yoke from your neck. And that's his blessing, which is that you're going to serve your brother. But at one point, you won't have to serve him anymore. Now, what we do know, and this might give away when this was written, there was a time when the Edomites were under the authority of King David and Solomon, that the Edomites were controlled by them. But there was a point in time later on, after the kingdom of Judah got weaker, because the kingdom of Judah really kept control of Edom. The northern kingdom of Israel, that was based in Samaria, they controlled the Ammonites and Moabites. They controlled that side of the Jordan. The lower part of the Jordan was controlled by Judah, David's family. But at a certain point, the Edomites were able to resist to get enough independence that they weren't controlled by David's descendants. So it could be that this was written after the fact that after hundreds of years, eventually Edom was independent of Judah. So it is, we do know that there was a time when that did happen. The Bible tells us it happened. And eventually the Edomites even go so far as turn on us and attack us when the Babylonians destroy the temple in 586. It's the Edomites who come in after the Babylonians and kill everybody else and take everything that the Babylonians didn't loot. The Edomites came in and cleaned up like vultures. So we know that was in 586 that the Edomites came in afterwards. So they were not good to us. Were not good. So there was definitely grudges. And Esau harbored a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing which his father had given him. And Esau said to himself, let but the mourning period of my father come, and I will kill my brother Jacob. So he articulates that. He says it to himself, but it seems as though when the words of her older son Esau were reported to Rebekah, so maybe he said it to himself, but she heard it. Rebekah knew that Esau was going around saying this. So if he's just muttering it to himself, she knew he was saying it. She sent for her younger son Jacob, and she said to him, your brother Esau is consoling himself by planning to kill you. It's the only thing that's keeping him going right now. He's going to kill you. Now, my son, listen to me. Flee at once to Haran, to my brother Laban, sorry. Stay with him but a while until your brother's fury subsides, until your brother's anger against you subsides, and he forgets what you've done to him. Then I will fetch you from there. Let me not lose you both in one day. So she tells him, you go. Get away from him, let him cool off, and then eventually you can come back. It will go down. It will subside. Now, of course, he's never going to fully forget it, but he's not going to be as angry always. And that line, let me not lose both of you in one day, is so, so, so powerful. because she knows that Esau is going to hold her responsible for this. She knows the dynamic. She knows that she's lost Esau. So she says, I don't want to lose you and your brother on the same day. If you get killed and he hates me, I don't have a kid anymore. Whew, that's a powerful line. People forget that line that Rebecca said, essentially acknowledges that she lost her son Esau that day.
Okay.
So what does she do? Rebecca said
May
to
not
Isaac,
lose you both.
Rebecca said to Isaac, I'm disgusted with my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries a Hittite woman like these from among the native women, what good will life be to me? So I like Rebecca as the ultimate Jewish mother saying, if my son marries a shiksa like the other one, I might as well die. That's what she says. I might as well be dead. It's the ultimate Jewish mother. And of course, what does she do here? She involves her husband, right? So she's going to say, Isaac, sit down. Let's talk about this. You got to do something. Now, interestingly, the Christians broke the portion right there, broke their chapter. You can't break it right there. That's the story. That's not the story. That's the story. The next line is critical. Of course, we don't break it there. Isaac sent for Jacob and blessed him. Well, he blessed him again. Well, here's what he said. He instructed, he said, you shall not take a wife from among the Canaanite women. Up, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take a wife from there among the daughters of Lavan, your mother's brother, your cousins. Now, take a wife. It doesn't say take wives. He didn't imagine that he's going to come and back with Rachel and Leah, but the best laid plans. And here's kind of, you could say, here's the blessing, the new blessing, the extra blessing. May El Shaddai bless you and make you fertile and numerous so that you may become an assembly of people. May he grant the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring, that you may possess the land where you are sojourning, which God assigned to Abraham. Now, I will put out there that that's maybe a better blessing than the other blessing. It's another blessing's a nice blessing too. I don't want to say one's better than the other, but isn't this the blessing? Isn't this the blessing of Abraham, that this land will be your land, that you'll be fertile and numerous, you'll be pru or vu, you'll be on this land, fulfill the biblical mandate to make this land a land for your descendants? This seems to be like the blessing. And Jacob went off. Isaac sent Jacob off, and he went to Padan Aram, to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram to take a wife from there, charging him as he blessed him, you shall not take a wife from among the Canaanite women, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padan Aram, Esau realized that Canaanite women displeased his father.
Good morning.
Like dad, he finally gets it. Oh, wait, my dad doesn't like us marrying Canaanite women. Well, guess what? You already married two of them. So Esau decides, I better get another wife. So he went to Ishmael and he took a wife in addition to the wives he had of Mahalat, the daughter of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, the sister of Nabal. And that is the last line, that Esau finally gets a wife that will make his parents happy. A wife that's not necessarily close in the same way as being under Abraham's side that way, but it's still Abraham's descendant. He gets an Abraham descendant. Not only does he get Abraham, he gets an Abraham literally like from Abraham, not from Abraham's brother, not Nahor's line. Abraham and Nahor are brothers, and then Bethuel and Laban are off that line. This is Abraham's son Ishmael. This is the granddaughter. This is the granddaughter of Abraham. Pretty legitimate woman, right? Well, that's Esau's third wife, is the wife of the wife that he takes from. Again, Hagar is the mother. Hagar is the grandmother, if you will, sorry, of this woman, but it is an Abrahamic person. It's an Abrahamic line. So Esau does marry somebody that makes his parents feel a little bit better.
Wow.
It's a weird portion, and there's lines in here that are like great lines, maybe even like half lines, clauses that if you miss them, you miss the repetition and the coming back to those themes, like the clothes, like the food, which seem to be toss away lines, but they're not. They're definitely not. And the blessing itself and how the blessings manifest themselves, that obviously is what everybody pays attention to. But look at the manipulations that go on in this portion. And the portion begins with Isaac kind of trying to start a family, and it ends with this: how do we get to this next generation? And so in the next portion, which we're going to read next week, is Jacob on his journey. Folks, this is all we get from Jacob. This is it. This is Jacob's life. Chapters 22 to here, chapter 28, sorry. It's the beginning of chapter 28. This is all we have of Isaac. And it's not an easy life. But if it wasn't for Isaac, none of us would be here. And our ancestors, including our more recent ancestors, held up Isaac as a model of how you should act, which is strange because you think, everybody messes with him. Everybody's playing games with him. Everyone's taking advantage of him. Everyone's putting him in a situation where he can't control his destiny. Everyone's doing something to him. Folks, why do you think this guy spoke to the Jewish people for the last 2,000 years? Why do you think we have so many Isaacs? So many of our ancestors are named Isaac, Yitzhak. They became Irvings and Izzy's and Isidores and everybody else, but they were all Isaacs, folks. They're all named Isaac. It was as popular a name as you can get in the Jewish people. Our ancestors for thousands of years looked at Isaac as a hero. You know why? Because he represented every Jew in every generation for the last 2,000 years who had no control over his own destiny and who was constantly having to figure out how to live without control over themselves. It's a tough thing to admit, but think about how Isaac almost died. He barely survives the Akedah. And every Jew for 2,000 years, especially Jewish men, felt a lot more like Isaac than anybody else. They didn't get to feel like Jacob or Abraham as much. They felt a lot like, are you kidding me? Now these people are taking advantage of me. Now I have to leave this country that I've lived in and try to be a good citizen here in France, or I try to be a good citizen here in Spain. And now you're telling me I have to go? Isaac was our archetype, folks. And it's very sad that we were the tremblers because we were suffering stress, traumatic stress for 2,000 years. And we literally are still emerging out of the shadow of the Holocaust, which was the ultimate Isaac event. So we are definitely the sons of Isaac. We are unfortunately Isaac. We've been Isaac too much. So think about that and understand why Isaac is such an important motif for us, such an important archetype. And as much as we want to give him recognition and say, if it wasn't for him, the Jewish people wouldn't exist. Let's hope that we don't have to be like this. Let's hope we don't have to be passive and have other people control our destiny.
And deceive us. And deceive us.
And deceive us. Be deceived by. And what can we do? We can't do anything. And people chasing us off and making us go dig another well. And now I got to dig another well, and I got to dig another well, and you're telling me I can't do this and I can't do that. That's been too much of Jewish history, folks, and I hope we never go back to that. I hope that's my hope, is that we never go back to having to live like Isaac. So we've had enough. We've had enough of that.
Oh, this
All
was
right, folks.
amazing.
What?
Question. You have touched me. I've never heard an explanation like this. You made this so powerful.
Thanks.
Half the time I'm thinking he lied. He, you know, and then you explain just why.
Yeah.
You know, wow.
Well, thank you, Diane. I love these portions, and I love the lessons that they teach us, and I can't help it but feel connected to these people, because I think of my own family. I think about those people who are our families, all of our families over the last 2,000 years, and I think about the life, the precarious life of our people, and it speaks to me in such a way that I and again, there's also the micro level that this happens to people. You know, it happens to people, unfortunately, today. You know, in their own lives. But the way it speaks to us as Jews, I don't ever want to go back. I don't ever want to go back to that. I don't ever want to go back to having to live with people taking advantage of us. And the crazy thing is that part of the twisted Isaac thing is that they would blame Isaac, right? That you'd blame the Jew for what was happening to him. And it's that kind of thing where Isaac has to leave and get away from the Philistines, because he didn't do anything wrong, but yet he gets blamed for it. And that's the crazy irony of it, is watching Jews get blamed for their own situation, for their own being marginalized, and quite frankly,
or when they were successful, they were then envied and wanted to be gone.
Yep, and that's what happens with him, is that he becomes too successful and they chase him away.
Yeah.
I'm
well, isn't that what happened to Einstein Academy? You were too successful.
I've lived
you
this
were
before.
Too successful.
I've
you
lived this exactly, and I've lived this before. And I've said, you know, what do you have to do? It'll happen, and it will happen to us. It will happen to Jews, and the thing that we do is we make excuses for it. We say, well, you know, we are successful, or we did do this, or we did do,
you did get good test scores.
Oh, well, no, but I'll give
you have waiting lists.
No, I know, but I'll give you the example. The example is that when Jews get put into a corner, most of us, we get so scared, and then we really do internalize it and think maybe it's me, because look, they'll say Jews are greedy, and they'll go, look at Bernie Madoff. Okay, you know what? For every Bernie Madoff, there's 10,000 Jews that go overboard to try to be ethical and to try to pay full price, so that somebody doesn't say to them, oh, he's a Jew, he's a cheap Jew. And Jew, in my experience, Jews go overboard because they don't want to be accused of being greedy or being deceitful, and really not just because they want to be ethical, but because they're so afraid of if they're not, they're going to be called out for it, and they're living in fear of it. And I know it happens. I felt it before. I felt the fact that, that I'm like, and especially if I'm wearing a yarmulke and I'm in a place, I'm like, oh no, they're going to think I'm trying to get something free here, or they're going to think that I'm going to, that I'm, not paying full price. I mean, I hear the voices in my head. Sometimes I know that I'm overthinking it, or that I'm projecting it, but I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't have to do that. And other people do it too.
And you may be right sometimes and wrong sometimes, but that it's out there that people are afraid they're going to get Jewed down.
And we hear it, and it affects our behavior. It affects us because I think we actually go overboard to try not to not to be perceived as being a Jew when it comes to our money, and it comes to that. I think we actually pay a higher premium because we actually are afraid to say, well, that's not the right price.
Right.
I really get worried about it when, like, it's happened to me when I've seen, you know, like I've been overcharged on something. And if I have a yarmulke on, I really do, like, I make this like weird conscious decision. You know what? Just leave it alone. Don't complain about, don't say anything about it. It's happened to me. So I can only tell you, if it's happened to me, and I've talked to other people, I know it happens to them.
Yeah.
It's not fair. And it's not, I wish we didn't have to deal with this. I wish we didn't. I'm praying that there'll be at some point 2 or 3 or 4 generations from now where people won't feel that way and won't hear that, like you said, being Jewed down. And those phrases will not be part of the vernacular, and that people can be normal, that they don't have to think about, you know, I'm not afraid. I don't want to say I'm afraid, but I do feel like I'm representing the Jewish people. And then I don't want to get accused of being cheap. I mean, I know that people feel this way. Like if they're known, like if they're, you know, an actor or something like that, that they don't want to leave or an athlete, they don't want to leave a little tip, you know, like too small of a tip, like they over tip so that nobody will say, oh, can you see what he just did? He didn't give us a big, so like, I don't know. And I think about it because
we overcompensate for what we think they may be thinking.
Yeah, I'm being very honest about it. I do it, and I don't think it's right, but I do it, and I recognize it, and I'm going to admit to you that I do it, that I overcompensate for it, and I do worry about it, and I shouldn't. I shouldn't have to worry about it.
Rabbi, I don't know a lot of rabbis, but I have not met one that is as generous. How many times you open your house to your congregation? You spend all this time. I don't know any other rabbi who does 4 hours a week with.
Well, thank you, guys. Thanks, Dan. I mean,
yes.
I enjoy it.
Don't sell yourself short.
But that's what I'm here for. But I will tell you this: I wish I had less of a feeling of representing the Jewish people and worrying about being perceived as a cheap Jew. I don't know what made me think about it, but it happened to me recently where I was like, yeah, I don't want, if they think that I did that, I don't have that feeling when I'm talking with another Jewish person. I really don't. Anyways, I just want to be normal. I just want to be treated. I want every Jew to be able to not be, I don't want them to feel this pressure of feeling scared, feeling that they're going to be thought of as being cheap or
that may be wishful thinking.
I know.
I agree.
I know. I just hope, that's my hope. My wish is that people can just be normal and not,
that would be nice.
I'm not asking for us to be treated better. Just treat us normal, you know, just don't, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that.
Just as a human being.
Yeah. Just, you know, don't have that expectation. Anyways, I hope everybody stays positive and healthy, and please everybody, you know, we're going to go on a bike ride on Sunday. For those who are going to be local and who have a bike, you can join us on Sunday at the temple. We're going to meet there. We're going to
Rabbi, we're going to cancel that.
What?
Governor Newsom has shut down the whole
right.
On Friday.
We can't go on a bike ride?
Well, you can go on a bike ride. Sharon doesn't want you to go anyway because you have an electric bike.
Stop that. You're shaming me. Now you're shaming me for my electric bike.
I think that's great. No, but seriously, because of the shutdown, and you can't have over 15 people together and no more than 3 families together. Sheila was going to cancel and redo it in March or April when it calms down.
Well,
that happened this afternoon.
Listen, I'm okay. I'll stay out of it, but we're on a bike. And I mean, I'll go along with whatever. Listen, I definitely don't want anybody to get sick. So whatever people feel comfortable with, I'll go along with the feeling. I'm definitely not gonna let anybody get sick. All right, so I guess there isn't one. So go on a bike ride then. Stay healthy, everybody, please. You know, do get exercise. If you're not getting exercise with us, get exercise with somebody with on your own. Take a moment. But I really do hope everybody gets safe. So I did not know that. Thank you, Harvey, for.
Well, that happened this afternoon. I think I'm trying to get a hold of Shelley.
Okay.
To put a e-blast out.
All right. Well, I will only tell you that I would never do anything that would jeopardize the health of the community. That's all I'm going to tell you. Whether or not. Okay, that's it. I'll leave it at. I'm going to leave it at that before I get in any trouble. So we'll study Torah remotely or do other stuff in the meantime. But everybody,
thank you for this wonderful class. This was a wonderful class. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Yes, thank you.
Love
Stay well,
to you
everyone.
all.
Bye-bye. Bye.